Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Kaushal Rao and today this is my first try. I'm going to create a video tutorial with my voice. So I hope you will definitely enjoy this video, and in this video I'm going to explain you all the concept of designing this wonderful portfolio design. This design is done with the Next.Js and Tailwind CSS with all beautiful features. You can see that here we have a different sections, right, in this portfolio. So services, banner, project, testimonials, why choosers, and blog in this video tutorial. So be with me and please don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. Before starting the application, first of all, we need Node.js in our systems to use npm, which is Node Package Managers, to install all our Next.js, Tailwind CSS, other installations for our project. So first of all, we need Node.js or npm. So I'm here in the Node.js website. You can find here download options, then download the node, and once you download the Node.js, you will find the npm in your system, and then we have to start our Visual Studio Code. So now I'm in Visual Studio Code and we have to open our terminal. So I have already terminal open here, but if you don't find your terminal, go to the click on terminal options and click on the new terminal, right? So now we have to specify node command to check our node installation. So here's the command and you can find that now we have the latest node version installed in our systems. To start creating this beautiful portfolio, first of all we need a folder. So here it is, our folder, and it's a Next.js project, and right click on this folder to open this folder inside the Visual Studio Code. So we have an option open with code, and as you click on this option you will find your folder inside the Visual Studio Code editor. First step is to create open the terminal, right? Click on terminal option from the menu bar, new bar, and then click on the new terminal. Now we have to use command npx create next app at the rate latest. Once you type this command and press enter, you will find the next create applications installations has been started and your new project options will be available in your terminal. So press yes, okay, and then it will ask you for the project name. So in the terminal window you have to specify the project name. You can see that what is your project name. So I am here giving the name print hub. So this is the project name, and once you click enter, you can see that here is the invalid project name because I used capital letter. So print hub. Now it will ask for the default installation, so just press enter. You will find that all the installations has been done in your project folder. So here you can see that now the project folder is created print hub inside the Next.js project. So you can, once the entire installation has been done, you will find all the files and folder structure inside this print hub project. So now we need to verify our installations. So we are in Next.js project folder currently. So first of all, we have to move on to the print hub folder. This is our project folder. So cd print hub and press enter. Now you are in your current project folder, and here you have to specify npm run development command. So you can see that now our project has been successfully run. Just check out the browser, click on this link that is you have given in the local host. So control and click and you will find that your Next.js project inside your web browsers. These are the basic installations, default installation. You can say that I'm here going to remove all these files that is not required for the our project, because we are going to create our project from the very scratch. So these are the files that we don't need initially. So first of all, remove these files from the public folder, right? Now in app folder we have this important file, so we don't need favicon ico, so this we have to remove this file. And now you can see that in app folder we have global.css, layout.tss, and page.tsx. Here I'm going to remove all this code from the global.css file, and save it. Then from page.tsx, I am removing this default code from this method. You can see that it is the export default function, home functions, right? And I don't need this code, right? And just make it save, and you can see that just write your own code here. Hello, put the testing your complete code that working or not, after remove the unnecessary code that we don't require. So you can see that from app folder we remove all the css from global.css, and then from page we have removed all the default code from the home functions, right? And layout.tsx, our title, we have to remove this title from metadata. So print hub Next.Js project. So this is the title, right? And this is the description. So we have done all the basic things to start our project. So now let's check once again, save it, and now you can see that whatever the change has been made is clearly working, right? So this is our own code, and the default code has been removed from the folders and files. So now we have done all the initial installation and setup. We need to install some additional library for our project. First of all, let's install bootstrap icon. Press enter. So now we have to install swiper. Basically swiper we are going to use to create slider in our project, so it is a swiper library. Now we are going to install countup.js. You can see that our installation has been done. Now I am going to install all the icons that I am looking for this project. It is remix icon. You can see that npm install remix icon, react photo awesome icon, and the svg icon. So press enter to install. So we done all the installations, and in the last installation you have, please check out again, we install all the icons together, remix icon, react icons, and the svg icons that we require for our project. So let's start to code. So now first step, after all the installations, to create our components. So in app folder, create a new folder called component. Inside the component folder, I'm going to create two component. First is Navbar, right? And the another is the footer. Both component are the common to entire project. So as you know that we need a Navbar as well as footer to all our pages. So I'm going to create these two component inside the component folder. So first of all, click on the Navbar, and we are going to create our Navbar of the application. So create a file, which is, so this is our first Next.js file, and we are going to use TypeScript over here. So you can find the extension tsx, right? So this is navbar.tsx. So in navbar.tsx, first line of code is use client statement, and which is directive, and it is used to basically uh, tell the component that you have to render client side. It means it render our component to the client side. Then the import statement, we need our hooks. So use state, use effect, and I'm creating a array for our menu items. So you can see that these are our menu items, and now let's create the component function. So this is our functional component, and I'm using here simple code snippet extensions you can use. This is React Redux code snippet, right? Inside this component you can see that we have a return statement, and we know that inside return whatever we design will be appear to the browser. So first of all, let's design our menu navbar, and let's check out it is working or not. Let's save it first of all, and you can see that it's a simple navbar component, and we have used div statement inside it. Let's make it like h1. Okay, fine. So this is our navbar component in layout.tsx, which maintains the layout of our web page. So you have to move on to the layout, and inside the body you can see there's element. Before this children, you have to use navbar. So as we use navbar, you can find that on the top of the file, the navbar will be imported in our code. So now let's check that our navbar is working fine or not. It's layout.tsx. So let's run our code, npm run localhost link, and so now our navbar is perfectly works. So let's start to design our navbar. In our code we are using Tailwind CSS. So first of all, let's use new element, and inside new element we have to specify the class name fixed for the fixed menu. Margin is 0, top margin, and the left is 0. So these are the Tailwind CSS class. So you keep in your mind that you have basic knowledge of Tailwind CSS. These are the color property values, and we need to define this all colors in our global.css. So we will define later on. These are the color that we need. If you want to change the color of navbar, you can specify this variable inside global.css. Then the transition, and duration for the transitions is so inside new, let's use div. We have to use flags, justify between and item center. These are the Tailwind class. So you need to have little knowledge about this. This is starting. So we need to use another div, and the class will require is the flags call. inside this we need a button element. So in button we need a span, a class name R, it will be the class name, and here is the print. We need another span element, again we need class name for the span is and so this is simple button we define right inside our Navbar. And for button we also have to use on click to handle our logo click, so that is handle, right? We need to define this handle logo click for, right? So this is, let's define handle logo click, and so let's add the arrow function for this, and we have to change our acts because when we click on our logo, our page will be scrolled to the top on the header, so we have to define that. So we need this, define this hook, so let's define it. Const active menu item. Basically we are using this hooks to manage our menu. So one is the active menu items, and for that we need set active item. It contains string, right? If we don't pass any string, it has null, and the initial value is the null. So in set active item we have to set the null, because when we click on the button it will be moved to the top of our page. And then window dot scroll to, so here I'm passing a simple object, okay. So we have defined our handle logo click function over here to handle this click on the button. Now let's move to our design. Now let's define desktop menu, and we need UL class, we need LG flex text, LG items center, we need a gap of 5, cursor text white, and font medium. right? So inside the URL we have to create our menu item dynamically. So as you know that we have already have the menu item array of string that provides our items, so let's fetch from there. So we need to write our menu items dot map, and within the map we have to use item and the index value, right? So let's define align. We need to specify the key, and for the key we have to use index value, which is inside the I, right? And then inside the li element I'm going to create button, and having the class name relative new menu transition all duration 300 cursor pointer, right? This is backticks, and you can say that we are using template literal. So here we have to use our active menu item to verify is equals to item. If yes, then internally expression we have to apply our active new class to the menu item and the text color to it. Otherwise we have to simply use white color. So this expression will dynamically create our menu item with checking whether if the item is active it will apply this classes, and if item is not active it will apply the text white color, right? So now let's define the social media icon for our new bar. So this is for social media icon, and let's define a div flex item center and gap 3. Inside this div we have to define all our social media icons. So let's use anchor tag, and here we have to use our icon for social media, and that which is Facebook, right? So in anchor tag we have to specify various class names. So I'm just copying to speed up the code because I'm a little slow, I think. So so these are the classes that we are providing for, you can see that border primary. You just keep in mind that these are the predefined um, variable for the CSS, and we need to define this in global.css. That will be defined later on after the creations just design of this our new bar. And all others are the predefined Tailwind CSS classes. So you can see that this all classes are justify, center, text white, p2 that is for the padding, round, full transitions for the animation, duration 300, and this is for the hover, right? So hover effect. So let's copy all this and paste. Now this is for Twitter, so let's use Twitter X, and this is for Instagram, and this is for YouTube. So we have defined our desktop menu, and now only one thing that we need is the button. So let's define button for our toggle button, right? And we need class for our button r. This is the size of the text, and this is 3xl. Specify outline none when the focus, and transition transform, duration 300, and hover scale effect. So this is the class for our button, and then now we need to specify dynamic code for our button. So if menu open, right, we have to use vi close, and if not, we have to use bi list icon. So now we need to use this menu, declare this menu open options, and let's define this first outside the returns. And so const menu open set menu open use state, and the initial value is the false. So it is a basically boolean value which determine whether menu is open or not. So if we found the menu is already open, we need to set this value false to close the menu. So it is I spell it wrong. This is open, right? So now it's okay, and let's move to the down, and you can see that the icon of the menu button will be decided on the value of this menu open. Now let's run our code, and this is npm run development. So click on our link. Oh, it's an error. Let's check what happened. Okay, so this is our return, and okay, see this, whatever we define here, this all hooks and methods should be inside the our components, and by mistakenly I just write code outside the component. So keep in your mind that we need to define all our component inside, sorry, our all our hooks inside the our component. So let's save it and okay, fine. So check, this is our final output, right? And now we have to decorate because this is just a simple, you can see, HTML code. Still our CSS has been not applied, so we have to configure our global.css and create CSS for our this new bar. So you see that without the CSS, our design is nothing. So first of all, come to this global.css, and this CSS will apply to entire our project. So first of all, I have to use import statement to import the font that I'm going to use, and for that I have to just, this is my font that I'm going to use in my project. Then we have to use import our Tailwind CSS, and so we use font and Tailwind CSS. Now check that how our web design appears. So this is our design, you can see that here, right? Let's import now bootstrap icons. So import, so this is for our bootstrap icon, and then we have to import our remix icon. So let's import it. Now let's create our variables that we are going to use throughout this our applications, right? So don't forget to use semicolon at the end of the statement. So these are the color that I'm using throughout this application. So I created this all variable. So I'm just aligning all this. So these are the primary, secondary, body color variable, and uh, then we have to define variables for our font. So these are the font, and the transitions animations that I'm going to use for the project. So this is complete variable, right? Now here we have a variable for the font, right? So let's create a simple class for it, font. All right, so that I can use this class directly. So these are the font, and I'm defining class for all this font. So as we define a color and fonts, you can see that now our new bar is quite visible. To use all this font everywhere, I also have to define this font inside my layout.tsx. So here it is layout.tsx, and we have two fonts by default here. So define next font that we need it, and describe the detail of this font. So let's declare a variable const and the font detail over here, and then so this is a simple font that we define here. Just like that, one more font we need. It is for Inter. And we also have to specify Inter here, and then story script. So we define this one, and now we also have to specify in our import statement. So now we define our font. Font has been defined. Now move to the global dot CSS. Let's define now our CSS scroll behavior first of all, and it's smooth, right? For body we have to use our background color, and which is body color, and then default color of the body will be white. Now we need to define Navbar CSS. So position relative, padding as 5 pixel, and transition regular. So this is basic Navbar class. See the final output after applying the CSS. Menu, and then we need to define after position absolute. New menu, 0, left 0, and background color secondary. Then let's copy it and write code for the before, right? So it is before and bottom is 0, right is 0, and the background will be the primary. Now for the hover, for active item, so the new bar has been done. Now you can see the effect, the hover effect of all the menu items, right? So this is clearly done. So our new bar has been created. Now we have to create footer components. So move to the component folder. In footer folder we have to create a new file and name it footer.tsx. Now first of all we need to use directive, use client, and then we need to create our function component for the footer, right? So now this is our component. Let's import the required file. Let's import useState hook, and then let's import link so now inside the footer component, function component, let's create some required variable and hooks. So let's first create active item set active item useState string, and initially it has null. So this is first hook that we create. Now remove this code and let's create our footer now. So let's apply the class name, these are the Tailwind CSS class, right? Inside this div element we need to create another div. So p5, then rounded to XL, section BG, border gray, overflow hidden, and margin bottom, that is 4. So see here, it is Excel, we have to update it, it's px, and let's create new folder for the section, footer section. And again we need Tailwind CSS classes, so flex column, and get 5. So one more div for the section inside the footer. In this div we need to define footer structures on click, and we need to apply here the method that will call when the button will be clicked, and then we have to use class name. So let's apply the all classes required. Here we handle click, so this is handle click, right? Copy it and define this method, just declare here. So we need to define this const, copy the name of the event, and this is our arrow function. Here we would define the definition when the user will click on this button, so how will this method react, right? This is basically to scroll the screen and to reach the active item. So we will write code later on. First of all, we design this entire footer. So here we have to apply the class. Story script font, drop shadow, MD, cursor pointer. So these are the class of the button, and inside the button we have to design logo, basically span element, and the class name that we need. The text will be print, and another span, text 400, and we need to type here 3D. So this section has been designed. So this is the entire section for the button. Now we have to define simple text paragraph. So use class name, text gray, and margin top is empty 5, and use dummy text over here. So this is simple paragraph. We need another div for the other section of the footer. So this is for the social media icon. So let's define flex item center gap 3 and margin top is 8, right? Inside this div element we have to define anchor elements. So this is anchor element, and we have to use class name from the Tailwind CSS, border radius, border color will be the like primary, so we need to use more classes. Hover, this is the width and height, and then flex rounded full transition all and the duration. So we are defining the links for the footer. So this is the first link that we are defining inside this div. So first is for Facebook, and we need to use class just like that. We define more links for the footer, so just make it copy and paste it here. We have to use Twitter, right, and it will remain similar, but here I found that one silly mistake, that this entire paragraph and this section for our social media icons should be inside this first div, right? So make changes in your code. We also need to apply transition effect on hover, so which is just translate y, and so these are the few changes that I made in my code, so please do it in your code also. So now we have to copy all this code. After defining all the social icon, now we need to define another section, so you can check that. So this is the div that we are currently defining, you can see that. And now after this div we have to define our another div, so let's define it. So come here and define another div. This is the second, and it needs full width, so w4. In last column the width will be the full. So now inside this first div, within this div we have to use class name to define internal structure, and we have to make it grid for display grid, and grid has calls on. For medium screen we have grid calls, default calls is 2, right? So, and for last screen we have grid column 3, and gap between the call is grid 5. So this is our structure that we define. Now inside the first div, let's define first and let's click links, and we need to specify the classes to define our heading. Shit. And this is font size, font weight is font bold, and margin bottom as 5. Below the heading we have another div, and we need to define the class for this div, and for the structure out it we need to use flags. Item starts and gap 2. Button, inside the button we have to use a simple icon, and here I'm going to use remix icon. For text color we are using secondary. Here we need to use text about us. This button, when we click on this button, it will move to the about us section of the page. So let's define the class for the button. So text lg, text gray, cursor will be the pointer, and hover, text white, transition all for proper visibility board. Just press enter, transition all, and after transition we need to use to define the transition effects on hover, so which is translate x y, right? And duration for the transition is the 300, right? So we define the button, and that we are going to create for move to the about us section on the footer also has event handler. So on click we need to define a simple method to scroll to all the section, and here I am passing the parameters, right? So when we click on the button inside the footer, it will scroll to that particular about section. So we must have to define this method first, right? That will handle this on click. So const, copy and paste it. So inside the footer you can see that we have two event handler. One is handle logo click and the another is for the link that will be used for the quick links like the about sections, service section and all that. So we need to define this all two methods. So first of all, let's define this scroll to section because currently we are working on it, and here it is parameter we are passing for that, and currently it's a type of any that we can pass any kind of the parameters inside this, right? So let's define a variable const section to find out the section, and const, and we have to fetch from the document. So document dot get element by id, and we have to find out the section using the id. So that is we are passing through this parameter, right? Technically we are going to pass the string. So when you pass string in parameter, this id will be as a string parameter, and we have to convert this in lowercase. So section will get the id of the section, and then we have to find out if section is there. Then we have to move to the section dot scroll to view, and we have to pass our object as behavior, and the value of behavior is the smooth. So this is our scroll to section function, and now we have to manage write the code for the handle logo click. So initially we have to set our active item null, then windows dot scroll to. So whenever we click on the logo, the page will be scrolled to the top. So that's why we have to scroll to the top, and so obviously we need to set top as 0, and the behavior is smooth for the smooth scrolling, right? So we define this two method. One is the handle logo click, and the second one is scroll to section. So now I copied and paste all the options with the different parameters about features, services, testimonials, and why choosers. So this our section has been designed with all the quick links, right? After the quick links, we need to define our others link. So that's why we have to change our section. So let's define another div, and inside this div we have to use others, right, and specify the class name to heading. So text to excel, font bold, and margin bottom is 5. So this is heading, and now we have to define the all others link. Flex call, and gap 2. So inside this div we have to define all the links, footer links. So this is the complete code that I already write. So this is our link, and we are specifying all this class name. This is the icon and text that we are using inside the link, and so this is our so this is footer link first that I design here, right? You can see the all the Tailwind classes, text LG, text gray 400, hover effect with the text white, right, transitions and the durations, and then the icon, remix icon for the arrow, and then rapid and precise prototyping, right? So these are the link that we are defining. So copy all the link and just change the link option. So I copied and paste all the link and just make the changes, right? So create similarly all the links of other section, and then we need to define our information section. So this is our other section. Let's define information section. So to speed up the code, I am just typing all the stuff right here. Sorry, pasting the I copied all the text. So see, this is the information section, and you can see the same div section with the icons class, right? These are the class for the structure, which is flex, item center, and gap 2, and for the icon I'm going to use bootstrap icon, this is bi phone, right? So here are the information regarding for the contact information. You can see that. So we define all the details about the information. So you can say it's a contact information. So now you can see that this is our main section. Inside that we define this div. So after this div, right, we need to define another section. So the final one, use class so we need to have margin, which is 20, padding is 5, and border, and then the border gray. So this is the copyright and rights reserve section. So you can say that we have to use simple class here. Flags justify center, items center, and gap 5. Inside this tree we have to just use a paragraph. So this paragraph has the text excel and text gray 400 class, that is from Tailwind, simple text for all right reserves, and here's a link, right, having sign class for the font and the font effect with the hover effect. So this is completely footer has been designed. So you can see now that our footer has been working perfectly. Keep in mind that we had already used this footer component inside our layout.tsx. You can see that here. So this is our Navbar, and the same, this is footer, right? And you must import footer at the top. So now for next is to create our all other section of the page. So before that, we have to use lots of image for our project. So what I'm going to do here, I'm copying all these images inside this public folder. So now we have to create our other section of the page. So let's create a folder in app folder, which is sections, right? Inside the section folder we need to create all the section of our page. So let's create first folder for our header section, right? So in section folder you can see that I created all the required section, and first of all we design our hero section. So let's create our page.tsx, and we need to create a functional component for the hero section. So let's create this one, and here we need to import hero image from @ public sorry public, and we need to find, so we import our image for the project, right? And inside this return we need to write our entire code. So let's create our design div. Inside div we have to use class, and for class we have to use hero section. So px 8%, and then for last screen it's px 12%. So this is our main div. Inside div again we have to use our structure. So for the structure we need w dash full for the full screen, flags call, lg flags row justify, between, and then items center and gap 5. So inside this main div we have to define our div partitions. So for first div we have to use class name, and then in class name we have to use first of all we have to define length and screen size, which is half of the screen in last screen, and then inside that we have to define our content. So let's define the heading, and in heading so this is our heading, and let's apply Tailwind class. So inside class name let's define text color, so this which is secondary, the font is inter uppercase text dash x1. So these are the class for our heading, and then heading name precision 3D sorry 3D. So this is heading, and let's apply the class. And for that we have to use text the size of extra large and LG text for the last screen, eat Excel, font bold, and so this is our first section we defined, right? Let's create a button below the heading. So button, and then btn button class, and then padding for 8 pixels, by2, border dash color primary, and background dash primary. Now after the primary we need a rounded button, so rounded full, text will be extra large, hover effect bg, translate transparent, cursor pointer, and then transition all, duration 300. So explore more. So this is right, and let's define this button inside a div. So div has flex class, item center, gap is 5, and margin top is 5. So we have to paste our design button within this div. So we define our first section inside hero. Now let's copy this button again and complete this section. So here we have to use icon, so let's use class name inside I element and play fill, right, and video production. So this is the text. Here we have to use transparent. The one button has the background primary color, having the background with primary color, and another button will be transparent. And when we hover the now it will become having the background color, right? So remove the transparent from hover, and we need to apply backgrounds, so use variable name primary. So these two buttons are inside this div element, right? And our first section has two headings and one div having the two buttons, right? So now we need another section, so to define this section now we need another, so div, and let's have apply the class name that we actually need the same as the earlier one. So we need a simple paragraph with the text. So this is the text inside the paragraph, you can see. And now let's apply the class for the paragraph, and class name will be text gray 300 and font will be enter text lg. So this is the paragraph, and after the paragraph we need another div section, and in class name we have to use class hero image, right? So for that we need image, so inside the image we have to use all attribute, and so you can see that now we have some error in this, so it means we need to define this one. So here we need to import image, so image from next slash image, right? Now you can see that we have to specify here all the attributes, so alt height, so width, so we define this, and you can see that now we are done with our hero section. So save it. So here we design our hero sections, and to implement this section in our page, first of all we need to create our main page, which is index.tsx. So in section folder I'm going to create a simple file which is index.tsx, which is our main, right, which is our main file, and with main page where we all section will be work when we run it. So in index.tsx we have to define our component, so let's define its rfc, right? And so it is our index functional component. Inside this we need to call our hero component, so that is, so we define our hero component inside it, and we need more than one component, so we have to use this fragmenter and import this component in the top, and then page. So now you can see that we define our component inside the index.tsx, and this index.tsx file is already inside the sections, right? So keep it in your mind, we are defining our page inside section.tsx, but when we run our applications this page will be run, so we need to call our index.tsx here. So how we can use it? In page.tsx, which is in app folder, right, page.tsx, we have to call our index. So let's call index, and we need to import our index here. So we done it, and now you can run your page, index page, and you will see that your hero section inside your index page. Let's run the code. Npm run development, and you will find your code will be run, and your file will be run in your browser. So you can see that now our hero section is here. This is our footer and this is our navbar, but we need to use some CSS for this hero section. So let's define our own CSS in global.css. So in global.css, let's write our code for the hero section. So in hero, you can see that there's a lot of like this class, right? We have defined our own classes. So we need to use to write code for our own classes. So let's first of all define hero. Let's define height and 100 VH, display flex, align item centers, justify content center. So you can see that now. See the effect now. Your footer has been, now your entire section covers the 100 VH height. Dot section bg, and we have to apply a background image for that. So background image URL, and we need this image for our background, and then position relative z index 1. So you can see that, refresh the page, you can find the effect of it, your images. So this is the background image, you can see that now, right? So we need to define After Effect for the section BG. So in after content is nothing, position absolute, top 0, left 0, width 100%, height 100%, and background image. We apply a gradient effect, so we are going to apply gradient color, right? And you can see that how beautiful it works. Z index is -1, so now you can see that the beautiful effect of gradient, right? So after the after effect, so this is our complete header has been designed. So after hero, we have to create the feature section. So in feature folder, let's create page.tsx. Inside the page.tsx, we need to create our functional component feature. So let's click on it and change it name feature, right? In import statement, first of all we need to import image from next, and the images that we are going to use in our feature section. So for import all these images, feature 1 from our folder which is public. Inside the public you will find feature1.png, right? So let's save it, and we can make copy paste of it because I already named the file in a easiest way. So this is for feature 2, and you can see that is features 2 and feature 3. So these are the import statement. Now inside the function component, first of all we need to declare an array for our data. So that's const features equals to, so this is an array of objects, and of course it's just an object. So let's use img for, and we use feature 1 comma title for that. So title equals to after the title we need description. So the key value is description, and in description we provide dummy text. It's lorem, right? Create another object, so copy it. Here it is, we have to use feature 2, and then custom manufacturing, and then the description is the same. So this is our last final object inside the features, and then in this div element we will design our feature section. So remove this div and take your own div inside the return statement. So div, let's use class name, and we need to use id for this, right? So this is our main div. Inside we will design our all the feature cards, right? So let's first create div for our feature card, and then use class name. We need to create a grid calls. For medium screen we need to use grid calls 2. For large screen we have to use grid calls 3, and use the gap 6. So let's now, so this is the div inside we will going to create our feature cards, and for that purpose we need to do one thing. To create all the features card we need to access feature array, and we need to use map function to fetch all the element, and We have to pass two parameters for the map. One is item, which contains each object from the features, and then the index position. So this is our function, and now we have to pass inside this. We have to define our structure. So this is the div in which we have to apply. So first of all, let's use key and use the unique value index for the key, and inside the div we need to use some class for the structure. So this is feature card flex that's called. For medium screen we need to use flex row gap 5 and padding 6 cursor pointer and rounded to excel, then border white, hover border, and we need to use border color secondary, then hover translate y1, and then transition all, and duration is 300. So inside this div we need to create our structure. So first of all, I'm going to use image, and for image first of all we have to use src item.img, then alt attribute. So for alt item dot title, and after the alt we use class name for image, which is object, cover width is 15 and height is 15. So this is image inside the div, and after image we have to use another div, use class name feature content, inside this div define the content and we have to use title over here, item dot title, in class text white, font sign, margin bottom is 3 and text size is 3XL, font bold. You have to define simple description and use class text gray, so we define our class, right? So now let's check our output. Before that, we have to use this feature section into our index. So use here feature component and import it. So we completed our import, and now let's run our code. Click the link to open in the browser. So now you will see that inside the browser you will find our feature sections just after the hero section. So here is our hero sections, and you can see that okay, fine. So we have now this three features options just after the hero section, right? So this is the final output for our hero section and all that. But one thing that I found here is you can see that this logo is not correctly uh, worked. That so let's find that what we missed in this. So this is our new bar, and you can see that yes, we need to define some classes for this button. So the class name, and we have to use text 5xl story script text white, and then drop shadow pointer cursor, right? So these are the, let's find, okay, yeah, you can see that now. One more thing that we need to check, this is the font that we need to correct the spelling. It's story script. Still is wrong, it's a story. Okay, so now it's correct, and let's find it. Okay, fine. So now let's move to the other section of the page. So now we have to define about section. So let's create a page.tsx in about, and first of all use client import image from Next-image, and now we have to import about image from our public folder, right? So these are our import statement for the project, and now we need to use hook that we need for our about section. Use state from React. We need to define an array for the FAQ data, copying the questions and answer. You can see that here, right? And another array for the state array. Now let's create our component. First of all, I need some hooks. So open index set open index equals to use state, and the initial value is 0. Then inside the return method we have to return our entire UI. So first of all we need div element, and in div element we have to use Tailwind CSS class. For last screen the padding is and we need to use id for this our about section, which is right. Another div, and we have class about image, and in that we need to use image, and an alternate text use simple about image text, class name, rounded to excel. So we need another div, and the class name flex call lg flex row gap 5 item center and margin vertical is 20, right? In class name we have to use full width, and for the last screen inside this div we have to define title, for heading we have to use this class, and we need a simple text who we are, right? Now we need heading, and in heading we have to use shaping the future of manufacturing, right? And we need class, and which is text gray, sorry, we need to use first of all font bold, and then we need font name, font size is 4XL, and then in medium screen we have to use text 5XL, text white. So these are the class. After that we need a paragraph, having class name text gray 400, font is enter, right? And the text is so this is the section. One section is designed. We need now a button, so this is the button more about us, and you can see that I use the class ptn mt8, that is for the margin top, and the pixel 8, py2 is for the padding, border color is the border primary, and then cursor pointer rounded full, text excel, and hover effect bg transparent. So this is the button. Now we need to do design the next. So this div design, we have to use the same another section for, and of course it has full width, but on last screen we have to specify the half of the screen, and then we have to fetch the actual data. For that we have to use FAQ data array and then map function. Within the functions we need item and index. As it is arrow functions, use the parenthesis and define our div with the key index and then class name, right? So what we need it, so this is the class name, and then we have to define, close the div. So inside this div we have to define button. So this is our button. You can see this. The button has on click event. We have to define this toggle method, right? So, and these are the class name, and you can see that I am using here template literals, right? These are the CSS class, you can see, right? And here we are just fetching the value of open index, comparing with the index. If it is okay, then we are using ternary operator. If it is true, it means this classes will be applied, otherwise no classes will be applied, right? And this, after that, inside this pen, which is the text part of the button, so we are using this class name and the actual questions of the item, and if open index is equals to index value, then we have to use the down arrow button, otherwise the up arrow button, right? So this is a simple for the button, because if we are going to create this kind of the button, basically this will design an accordion, right? Having the questions, once you click on the questions it will open with the answer. So this is one type of the accordion. So after the button we need so this div contain the answer, and you can see that it's dynamically designed. The class name is already over here, so when the open index value is equal to index, it will apply this class, right? Otherwise this class. And inside this paragraph we have answer of our FAQ array. So the only thing need is to design this toggle method so that our button functions well. So define toggle, toggle is an arrow function having the parameter index of type any, and then set open index open index. If is equals to index value, then it will be null, otherwise index, right? So sorry, we have to use index. So this is our toggle event handler. You can see that we use toggle over here and passing index. This index value will be passed to this over here in toggle, and then set open index, set the value on basis of the index value, right? So now, so this is the we done last, and one more section we require to complete. So let's define another div inside the main div, and we need to use class grid calls one, and then for small screen the grid calls two, and for last grid calls four. And here we are going to use counter class, and then margin top 20 inside this div, right? We have to use state array to define counter. So before that, we also have to use counter. So import counter from the React counter, and we need this in our code over here. So now we have to map the states this array. So let's move here, and states dot map having two parameter item comma index. So let's define our div here, and this div has the key element with the value index, right? We also use to class name inside this div. We need a heading, font bold, and then text white, tracking wide, and margin bottom 3. Here we have to define now our counter. So let's use first of all we need starting value, so that start equals to 0 and equals to item dot value. So duration is 3, and then enable scrolls by, and then scroll by once. So we define this our counter, and then need span element. Inside the span we have to use class name text with the prime color, then font bold, margin left is 1, and then the content which is inside item dot suffix. So after the heading we need to define our paragraph with labels. So this is our paragraph having the classes and then item dot labels. So we design it. So now we have to use our about section inside the index.tsx. So I use here and import this about.section, and let's run this code. Press npm run development, and you can see that this is our final output. Now this is our features and this is your about section. So they are working perfectly fine. So this is our accordion, and you can see that this is the counter, right? Refresh it, you will find the counter is working. See this, once page loaded, counter will be work according to your value in the states array, right? Okay, so one more thing that we need to do, we need some stock for this font. So let's design the css for this. Here you can see the counter class, so we have to define this counter class in our global .css, and here it is the simple counter, and within the counter class color is transparent, and we are just using stock for the text. So this is a stock width is 1 pixels and the stock color is the white. So save it and let's run it. This effect is in stock. Move to the next section and we have to define our service section. So in services, create a page.tsx. Page.tsx, first of all we need to import images that we are going to use for the services, and links, import the links for that, and then we need an array of data in form of JSON objects. So let's create that array. So it is service data array, and you can see that for services I'm just creating a simple JSON object array having ID, title, description and images, right? So you can see that service 1, service 2 are the images that we are using in from our folder and importing from that public folder, right? After that we need to create our functional component. This function component, you can see that we have a return method having the main div. Inside this div we have two child divs, and this is the actual structure that we are going to design in services section, right? So let's define the class for the main div, and so you can see these are the CSS class for our main div, and we have to specify the ID services, right? So services, right? Then this is the child div. For that we also need the class for the structure. So these are the class for our child div, and you can see that we have defined flags inside it and justify between item centers. Inside this div let's define the internal structure of our services. So we need a div element and Tailwind CSS class for this div. So you can see that the width full for large screen it has a 50%, and grid we are defining grid in for this div, and grid columns 1. For medium screen it has 2 columns, and a gap is 8 between the columns. Inside this div we need to fetch our service data. So services data dot slice, right? and we are slicing, right, so that we can find out. After the slicing, we have to map that data, and item and index will be as parameter, and so we need to define fetch this item data with the design. So first of all, what obvious is div element. Inside the div, the first thing is to use index as a key, right, and then the class name. So you can see that these are the class name: flags column, gap 5, right, padding 6, cursor pointer, rounded, 2 xls, border white, and the hover effect as a border primary color, and the background color will be the body color with the transitions, and durations of transition is 300. So this is our div, and inside this div we have to use our contain. The first of all, we need image for the services. So this is image, and in image src we are passing item.image for alternate text, item.title, and class name object cover width 15 and height 15. After that, we need another div for our title. So let's define the div. Inside this div, we have to define the structure, which is for title, and for title we have to use heading. So let's take the heading over here with the class name text whites, and you can see that this is cy in, and its sign is the defined point by us, and this is the css Tailwind class, and finally the content is item.title. After the heading, we need a simple description, so we need to define paragraph for that, so which contained all the descriptions, and with the simple class name text gray 300. So this is the inner structure of our service section, right? And then after the paragraph, we need a button for read more, so let's have it. At the button, you can see that we use class text xl empty4 text primary color with the hover effect, and transitions and durations with the cursor pointer. This is the text, and similarly we are using icon for that, which is arrow icon, and this is how our button will be appear. So you can see that we define our first div element. So minimize the sections, press enter over here, and you can see that this is our another div with the same width, and the having the class name title over here, right? In heading, you can see that we are using inter font semi bold uppercase tracking white text. Secondary, this is simple our services heading, and simple text inside this heading. This is clearly dummy text to represent simple text inside the service section. So we define both the classes. You can see now that, so we define this both classes. Now we have to define this div structure. Div, we have to define class to provide the grid, and you can see that grid columns 1. For medium screen we change the grid columns 2, and for large screen we change the grid columns 4. So gap is 8 and margin top is 8. So inside this div, again we need to access service data array, and we need to slicing the array element, and the first parameter is the where to start, so that is 2, and then service data dot length. So after slicing, we need to use map functions, and as obvious, math has two parameter. Item, for the content, it will access the first object from the return array, and then give the index positions of each element, and then our design. So first of all, we need a div. So inside this div, we need to define classes, and first of all, before the class, as obvious, we need to use key, and the key value is obvious index. After the index, we have to use class name. So these are the class. You can see that flags call gap 5, right? And the same as for the all other divs that we are using. So now inside this div, again we have to define the content of that particular service array. So first of all, we need what? Image, and for image, as usual, we have to use image title and image in src and class name object cover. After that, we need a simple div to define internal structure, and you can see that we need a simple title in the form of heading and then the description. So let's make a copy of it, and this is simple class name, text white sign and font bold. You can use that item.title to fetch the title data, and the same time inside the paragraph we have to use item.descriptions. We also need the button as we defined earlier, so just create the same button after the paragraph, and you can see that inside the button we have many classes for the transitions, cursor pointer, right, the text and the hover effect, right? So now we define clearly our entire service section. So after this page.tsx, we need to define some css for our service sections. So inside the globalist.css, I'm just here using service sections, service bg class, and after that I'm just providing background image as a radial gradient color. So this effect will be work for our service section. So let's check out the output. Before checking the output, we must use our service here, right? So let's import. So now we can check our output. So now you can see this is our services section, right? So it's perfectly run, and you can see this is the gradient, radial gradient effect. You can see the checks behind it. So next we have to create the banner. Basically banner is very simple. You can say call to action section where we provide the contact details. So let's create it, page.tsx, and inside the banner let's define function component, right? Name it banner, and in the div section we have to define a simple div. So inside div we have to use class, and you can see that these are the class, and provide the id banner. Inside this div define another div, div we have to use all the classes. So this is the full length and flex. After the flex, justify center, item center. And now let's use our content inside this div. So we have a div having the class name title, and we have two headings with the content and a button with context now. So this is very simple section, right? And let's add this section to our index.tsx. We need to import and then so you can see this is our simple banner section, right? So after the banner, let's create our project section. So create a new page.tsx, page.tsx. We have to use client directives. It will render our page to the client side, and these are the images that I'm going to use inside my project section. So you can see that this all images are derived from the project public folder. So next we have to create a simple data for the project section. So project data, I'm going to create a simple array. The array will contain the JSON object, and all object has the key value pairs. You can see that the ID, title, descriptions, and the image. So we can use this array to fetch data for the project section, right? And then we have to define our function component. So let's define project component, and this is our component, and inside this project component we have to use a return statement that returns our UI. And so let's define our UI for the projects. For project, we have a main div, and inside the main div we have three sections, so we have to define three div for each section, right? And for the main div we need to apply our CSS classes with the ID. So you can see that here is the class. This is for padding. For large screen we change the padding 12%, and we use section BG again here, project BG, and this is vertical padding, and the ID of the project is project sites. So inside this is our first div. So let's define all the classes for this div. So let's move into this div. Here it is title, flex, and flex column, item center, justify center, text center, and mb10, which is for the margin bottom. This is utility class from the Tailwind CSS. In first section we need to define simple three things: the title heading, right? And so inside first div we have to use, this is our latest project, right? And in heading we have to use enter font, semi-bold, uppercase, right? And applying the text secondary color, right? So this is the variable that we are using for the applying text. And then h1, these are the sign font bold. You can see margin, vertically margin is 4, and the text size is 4xl. For the medium screen it is 5xl, and the color is text white. And finally we have a simple class name, paragraph for the detail. So after defining this sections, in this second section we have to fetch the data from our array, and before that we need to use class to define all the service project section. So here are the classes, and we are defining grid. We are defining for this div a grid having the column 1, right? And in medium scheme the column will be 3 and gap should be 5. So this is margin bottom 5 and the index is z index is 10, right? So now let's move to the content. So now inside this div section we have to fetch data from project data array. So project data dot slice, the slice function will return the array extracting the given position, start from the 0, and it will fetch 3 element from the project data, and then we map on it. Inside the map we have to pass a parameter. So this is an object that we are going to pass. So each project so when map has the array, each project will be stored inside this project, and we can individually work on this project now. So we need a div element to create our UI service for projects. So obviously first of all we have to use key element, and for that we need to specify project.id. So now the div having a key value with the project ID, and then we need to use some classes for it. So let's specify the class. So you can see that we specify all this class. So these are the CSS, Tailwind CSS class: overflow, hidden, cursor pointer, rounded axle, right? For rounded effect, and then hover effect for the border, hover effect for the background color, and the hover effect for translate, right? So smooth transitions, we need transition all in duration 300, and inside this div we have to use image, and in image we have to use source and the alternate text attribute, and for source it will take image from the project object, and the same for the title, and then we have to use class name. So these are the class for our image, and you can see that we have an object cover, full width, brightness 50, hover effect with the brightness 75, and transition all and duration 300, right? And then we need to define another div with padding, right? And inside this div we have to use the content with title, button, and paragraph. So see that in this div we are using h3 for the project title, and for project description I'm using here paragraph with the text gray, and button with all the classes required for the button as usual. We are using in our all this design. So you can see that it is border over here, rounded, axle, text size, and even it has a boolean class, cursor pointer, transitions, and durations, right? So this is design for this another div. So now this is the final div, and we have to specify the class for this div, and we are defining grid system here. So grid with the column 1 for medium skin 2 and having the gap 5. Now again we need to fetch data from our project data. So let's, you can see that here it is an array that we are using to fetch data, slicing this 3 element, right? And using the map we are fetching data into this object. So now we have to press enter and specify our design inside this. So we need to define div again, and inside this div we have to specify key as earlier we had done. project.id, and then we have to use class name. So these are the class, you can see that. And now we have to define the structure inside this div. So let's define it. But please keep in your mind that these are the class. You can see that all are the similar class as earlier we defined. So it has a rounded axle, overflow hidden, cursor pointer, group border gray, and it has a width of 500, and hover border primary color, hover effect with the background color, that is body color, and the hover effect with the translate, right? And transitions all, and duration 300. Now we need to specify image, and for image we need to use source and alternate tags from the project object. So here you can see that SRC having the project.image and alternate text has the project.title, and then we define the classes for image. Now we need to define our another div after the image that define the structure. So after image use the div element, and you can see that this div has a class named p5 which is padding of 5, and then for title project we are using s3, for descriptions we are using paragraph p element, and then for button the obvious, you can see that btn mt5 px8 py2 border, then border has primary color, rounded axle, text axle, hover, bg primary color, cursor pointer, transitions all, and durations 300. So these three are the child of this particular div element. So you can see that now we have designed our complete project section over here. Save it and move to the index.tsx over here, and also use your component over here, that is project, and must import here that we design our project section, and you can see that this is the complete design. So one more thing we need to do is let's make little changes to our, here you can see this is the gradient effect that we applied on the services, right? So this, it will also be used in project bg. So and also for the footer. So save it. So you can see that this is the final output, and you can see this all our projects are displaying here. So now we have to work on testimonials. So in testimonials, let's create a new file, page.tsx. In page.tsx, we have to add some additional libraries because we are going to create a slider over here, and that for that purpose we are using here swiper.js. So you can see that this is the use client for client side rendering, and then I'm using here swiper and swiper slide, right? And then autoplay from the swiper module. So these three things we are using just to create our slider, and then the images that we require for our testimonial sections. And you can see that for that purpose we have to use image from next image, and then all the images that require testimonial 1, testimonial 2 and 3, and then the content of the section. So that is, we need an array, and this is our data. And now we have to create a simple functional component. Start to create your component over here. This is testimonial component. Inside this we have to use return method to design our UI. So now we need a div, and inside this main div we have a single div, and here we have to use swiper. So in initial div we have to apply some classes. So let's apply it. These are the classes. Padding 8%, for large candidate is 12%, and padding wise 20, and then later on we have to use testimonials. This is our main div, and now we have to work inside this div. So let's apply class to it. So these are the class for the internal div, and you can see this it has a flex and flex justify center, item center and flex column. So within this div we have to use the heading for the section and little detail for that. So let's define that heading now. So you can see that we have heading first, heading what our client says, and then heading 1 for trusted by innovator and creators. Here it is inter class for inter font semi bold, uppercase, tracking wide and text dash secondary. Same here, we are using font bold, right, margin and text size, and then sin font that we define already, and this is the description for the section. Now we have to define the swiper. So swiper required some basic settings. So I'm using here simple swiper element. So this is the swiper, and we are using for creating a slider. Opening tag, we have to specify the swiper settings property, and these are the properties. So modules autoplay, it will slider will run automatically. Space between 30, slider previous view. Free autoplay delay timing, and disable on interaction, this is false. And then loop and breakpoint settings for the responsiveness. So for autoplay we are making loop is true, and for breakpoint these are the different breakpoint. For 1200 the slider preview is 3 slides, and for 991 we have 2 slides per view, and so on. You can see that. So these are the settings for the swiper, and then we need to apply class name for the swiper. So it is class name equals to testimonial swiper, right? For swiper contained, we have to fetch data from the array, so we need to access our testimonial data array, and we have to use map function inside it. Arrow function with two parameter, item and index, and then for swiper we need to use swiper slide. So our testimonials require swiper slide, right? And every slide required a unique key, so first we need to use index. Within this slide we have to define our structure, so this is the main div. So now we have this class for this div inside the swiper slide, right? And inside the div we have to define another div for the actual content, having the class for margin, padding and transition. So these are the class inside the div. So this div we are going to create this rating of our testimonials. So you can see that we have used testy stars, text color over here, flex and gap 2, text lg, and margin bottom is 5, right? Here we need to use a code that will create star for us. So you can see that we have an array, we are creating an array dynamically. You can see that this array having the length of 4 element, right? And map will return this 4 element with the star icon. This is the placeholder in the map, and this is the I for the index, so that I we are passing for the key, and using the bootstrap class we are creating star for our testimonials. So this code will return 4 star with the fill icon, and the later you will see that another star without the fill. So you will see the star on your testimonial card. This is a simple text, and for that we are using just paragraph and accessing value from the item object and with the text property. After the paragraph we have to define another div, and this div has, you can see that here, this is the entire code. We have a div element with this testy sections, flex, items, center, justify, between. Inside this div we are defining the image of the person. So you can see that the image has src item.image, name as alternative text, and the class name for the image. Then we are defining the name of the person and the role. So after the role we are just specifying quotation icon, you can see here, and here it is how we complete our slide, right? Let's save it. Now you need to import this testimonials inside your index.tsx. Okay, so again save it, and now let's check the output. Here it is, our testimonial section. You can see that this is our testimonial section. So you can see here, due to the overflow property of swiper.js, which is the inbuilt property setting in their own classes, you can see we are not able to see the bottom border. So let's find the things and solve it. So you can see that this is our main swiper, and just because of the height and overflow property are overlappings, just let's specify the inline style for it, and we need to use height property over here, and then height of the our swiper container. So let's hope it works well now. Yes, you can see that now it's working fine. After testimonial, we have to define why choosers. So in page.tsx, first we need import statement. After that, we have to create our functional component, which is export default. Name of the component will be why choosers. Inside return, we have to define the structure. So let's give a structure. This is main div. Inside div, we have a wrapper div for our components. This which is first div, and this is the second div. So this is how we design our structures. And initially, let's apply the classes to our main div. So these are the classes for the main div, and you can now give the id to this our div, which is right. Now for this div we have a class, and you can see that these are the class for the div. And now we are on our child div, which has the actual content. So we have to specify class for it, and then lgw that. So for last screen, it will display in the half of the screen. The scene we have to use for this one. So these are the two div inside this wrapper div, and we have to define now the first one. This div we have a simple another div with the title class name and having the headings and paragraph for the content. You can see that simply the title is why choosers, and then we have some heading content leading the way in 3D printing, and then the paragraph, right? After this we have another div which define other content and having the class name flex call. For medium screen we have to define flex row gap 5 and margin top is 8. So inside this div we have another div, and you can see that we have all the points inside the headings with icons. You can see this we are using the bootstrap icon, and all the heading have the same class, that is flex gap 2 margin bottom 1 and text lg. It will define the points with the icon. We have one more div to define the similar points about our why choosers option. So we have two div inside this div to define the points about why choosers, and you can see that it's a very simple concept, having the icon with the text inside heading element. So now let's design another div having the div element once again with class name flags call, gap 4, and margin bottom is 5. It has two div with the class flags call, right? This is not gap 7, it is gap 4, so it's my mistake. So just copy the same div inside this div and let's design now it. So inside this div you can see that one is the h2 element with the div element having the range bar, right? We will define this range bar in our globals.css. So these are the content, and same we have to define with for another div. So you can see that both have the same classes, text to excel, sign, mb3, right? This is basically we define the class for the font name. So in the very beginning we will define all, we had already defined all this thing, so keep it in your mind. This is for the font classes. You can see in throughout the entire tutorial, these are the class that we need to define still, so we'll define in our globals.css. So now the first section has been completed. Now we have to move on the another section of the second child div element, and this is just for the image. So we are using another div having using your image with alternate text and having the class name. So we have completed our white user section, but we need to define some classes in our globals.css. So let's move on it. So now first of all we need range bar, and for range bar we have a positions relative, width 100% and height 20%. Background color is, so this is the background color, and then border radius will be 50 pixel. Now we need to use range. You can check that in our code we use rang, so keep in your mind, right? Range bar after content is nothing, position absolute, top 0, left 0, width is 5%, width is 95%, and height is 10%. Background color is primary, and then border radius is 50 pixel, right? For seeing we need to define our before effect, so let's use it. And before in content it is 95%, position absolute, and you can see that for top we have to change the value, which is minus 40 pixel, and left is 90%, 95%, sorry, it's 90%. Now We don't require this stuff. We have to define our font, so that's why font size 1.5 rem. Font weight is 600. Font family, of course, where. So this is complete. Now we need range bar 2, width 76%, and then two column before content 76%, and then left should be 71%. So we define our required classes for this. So here it is, our output, final output, but I think we are missing something over here, so let's check out. Okay, so we have to use here 20 pixel. Now let's check it. Okay, fine, so it's working well. So this is our why chooses section, and now we have to define our final blog section. So for the blog section, we have to create a page.tsx. Inside the page.tsx, we need initial imports. So you can see that we have swiper for the slider and autoplay from the swiper module for the swiper, and then CSS for the swiper. We also used directive use client to render this page client side, and then we have to import all our images. These are the images, and then we need our blog data. So for that we have to create a blog data array of objects, and this is the content of array. We have image, title, descriptions, comments, right? So you can see that this is our blog data content, and now we have to create our function component, export default function, and the name of the function component is blog, return having our design. So first of all, as usual, we need a main div, and inside the div, these two div are the container of our content, blog content, and let's apply the initial class name for our main div. And this class are for padding, and now we have to use id for our section, which is blog, and now inside this div we have to use class name to define our structure. So these are the class: title, flags column, item center, and the justify center. This is for the structure, and inside this div we have to define our block content. So first of all, title of our section, so this is h3 element, and you can see that we specified font classes and text classes, then define the another heading with the same classes for the heading and font, and then we need to define a simple text. For paragraph, we have to use this class. For the text enter, right? For the screen size large, we have to specify with 75% and the text gray. So defining this div element, we need to use define our another div, and let's have the class name for margin, which is margin top 10, and we need to define a swiper here. So for the slider, so swiper element, right? Inside the swiper, we have to use swiper setting property. So let's start it with it. So first is modules, and in modules we have to specify autoplay, and for autoplay we have to specify delay and disable on interaction settings. You can see that it is 300 3000 and false. Then we have another setting, you can see space between and loop, which is true, and breakpoint setting for different screen sizes, which makes slider responsive. And then we need to use class name. So for this we have to use blog swiper, and we need to define this class also, so in our global css. Now inside the swiper we have to fetch the block content, so let's define our core fetch blog data array with map function, and from the map we have to fetch our object one by one in item. So first of all, yes, we have to pass item as parameter, and then index. It is an arrow functions, and we have to define our structure within this. So first of all, we need to use swiper slide element provided by swiper library. Okay, let's specify key for it, for unique key value, and specify index as key value. And now we need to define our block structure. So for that we need to define a div element. Within a div we have to use our Tailwind CSS classes. You can see that these are the classes. So block card, this is for padding, rounded effect, right? Border, cursor pointer, border gray, transitions all, and durations, and also for the hover effect. Inside this div, the first div is for the blog image. So let's define class name blog image. Inside this we have to use our image element, specify a source and alternate text from the object that we are fetching from block data. You can see item.image for the src and item.title for the alternative text. These are the classes for the animation as well as to set the image as an object cover. Now we need to define blog headings, so of course h2 element. So here are the classes that we are using for the font name, text white, right, text size, and for margin, font bold, hover effect, transitions, and animations. Within this element we have to specify item dot title, right, to fetch the block title, and then this is our heading, and now we need content of the blog. It uses the classes that we need. Blog content, we need to define this class. These are the CSS, Tailwind CSS classes, and inside it we have to specify the content of the blog. First of all, you can see that this is the blog section. Here we are applying calendar icon for the date, and we are fetching the item.date. After the date, we need to use comment section, so we have to access comments of the blog, and you can see that for that we have a bootstrap icon for the questions, and then text Excel, text color is secondary, and here it is the comments that we are fetching from our blog data array. Now after defining the blog content, we have to access blog descriptions details, so we are using this simple paragraph with the item dot description, that is we are accessing from our data array, right? And then a simple button. This is our button, and inside the button we are fetching item dot tag, then icon for our button. You can see that in button we used text primary, flex item center, cursor pointer, gap to, text alg, large size, font bold, and the font family is sign. Then hover effect for the button with the transition effect. So now we have defined our swiper for the blog. To do is inside the index we have to access our blog, and also we need to import blog from so you can see that we define our blog section, but also we need to define some classes in our globals.css. So in global.css, let's define the classes that we need for our blogs. So first is blog image, and for that we need to set overflow hidden, then border radius 10 pixel, blog card, we need to apply hover effect, so when we hover blog card, blog dash image img, we need to apply transform effect, so let's have scale 1.1. so these are the simple things, and final we need to little write media query, customize media query for our hero section for the screen having the width 991 pixels, and for class hero we have to use height 100% as well, the width margin top is 12%, and the same for the smaller screen size. And we can see that I just need to copy it, and the screen size is 575 pixel, and just we have to set the margin top is 15%. So this is complete code. Now let's check out. So see, this is our beautiful blog section with the slider, and now you can check our entire design completely done. So our design has been done. Now you can check out, everything is working fine, but I made a little change in our navigation bar. For that we need to change some things in our Navbar component. You can see what we are going to change is that to handle the scrolls by, we have to write use effect to manage smooth scrolls by in our project. So let's move to the Visual Studio Code and in Navbar component. Here you can see the use effect hooks, and we are writing code for handle scrolls by. This is our current variable, and from menu items we are loop through all the items and fetching the section into the section. If the section exits, we have we have to find out the top positions and the height of the sections. Then for scrolls by, we have to check that if windows dot scroll y is greater than the section top and window dot scroll y is less than section dot top plus section height. So we have to set current id. So when we click on any of the option from the new bar, you can see that the current id, you can see that now currently we are on the block, so it is, you can see this is the current id. If I am clicking on about, so now it will be highlighted with this effect. So managing these things, we have to write use effect. Now currently we are working, we are on services, so you can see it is highlighted with the active, and current is the services. Now it is on banners, and then set active item current. Finally we need to call this our scrolls by event on windows scroll. So here we are calling the handle scrolls by on the scroll, and finally return windows dot remove event listener on scroll handle scrolls by. So I hope you understand all this code, and you will definitely enjoy my video. Please comment me that how you like this video. So this is my first attempt, so maybe possible there are some few glitch and error, but I will try my best to provide you the complete tutorial with proper explanations and level up your skills.